that they focus on the, oh, yeah, sorry, we're going to be recording this when you press the button. So the second point is that the leaders focus on we rather than me. And the third point is that they inspire, foster transformation, and bring out the best in those around them. And the fourth is that they lead by example. And the fifth is that they prioritize creating value for all business stakeholders. And the sixth is that they cultivate a culture of trust and care.
Liz, could you repeat the first one
And
because I hit record right as you were
oh,
saying it?
yes.
Thank you.
The first is that good leaders must first become good servants. There's something called servant leadership. There's a really good book out there called Servant Leadership, which I really highly recommend. We're going to start off the discussion by watching a really brief video. It's about 5 minutes, or I'm just going to show a 5-minute snippet that really, I think, does a really good job at explaining kind of really at its core what at least I believe conscious leadership looks like. And then we'll dive into a discussion about it and see what everyone else thinks. And hopefully I can do this without technological hitch.
But really, what is leadership? And if you step back, leadership is about getting the work done, whatever that is to you. Whether it's winning a presidential campaign, whether it's having a successful new initiative at a company, whether it's being a fantastic principal at a school, or raising healthy, happy children. So whatever that is to get the work done. And it does seem that getting that work done is changing. How we get that work done is changing today. And I always say when I go out and speak, I ask people in the audience to raise their hands if they think they're a leader. So how many of you in this room think you're a leader? And almost every hand, thank God, goes up in this room, right? But you would be surprised. At most places I go to, half of the audience does not raise their hand. So the other takeaway from writing my book was, I say every one of us is a leader. Why? Because at the very least, we're leading our own lives. We decide where we work, how we show up, how we dress, how we deal with conflict, the choices that we make, and then taking responsibility for those choices. When I was at Harvard, I ran the Center for Public Leadership with a guy you might have heard. His name is David Gergen. And both of our mentor in the world is a guy by the name of Warren Bennis. And Warren was the chairman of our board at the Kennedy School Center for Leadership. And Warren said, let's do a survey on leadership. And let's do it every year. And let's take a view of what Americans think about our leaders. And we partnered up with U.S. News and World Report. And since 2006, we've been publishing this take on Americans' views on leaders. And I know you're not going to be surprised to find out that we've been in a 20-year decline in how Americans feel about their leaders across all the industries. Everything from religion, business, politics, press. And what's fascinating about that is we did a conference in 2006, actually to honor Warren Bennis, but it brought together academics, thought leaders, business leaders, political leaders. And there was this unbelievable agreement that the world had changed, and obviously the workforce has changed, more women and people of color and young people, and that what worked in the past, I love Marshall Goldsmith's book, the title of it, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And that's really where we are in leadership. What got us here won't get us there to the next trend. And what came out of that conference, and David and I still talk about it today, which is this unbelievable agreement that, wow, gone is command and control, leadership. And in is a more feminine leadership style that is one of collaboration and listening and bringing people together and not thinking you know everything. And so this was the infrastructure of which I had in my past to set out on my journey to write my book. And as I traveled across the country, and I was one of the only people that had worked for Obama in a senior role in 07, 08 that did not go into the administration. So all of a sudden I started getting all of these invites from corporate America. And so I felt like the last 3 years I've been traveling around having this, not only writing my book, but having this giant focus group with corporate America about the struggles that they are dealing with, and sharing some of my ideas about leadership as I wrote my book. My book had 3 iterations. It just came out last fall. And this is the thing that I took away, which is not surprising to any of you in this audience, which is why you're here today, which is companies struggling with this topic of engagement. And CEOs saying, scratching their head saying, oh my God, 50 to 70% of my team is disengaged and unhappy. That's what all of the studies are showing, disengaged and unhappy in the workplace, 50 to 70%. So in every audience I speak to, I say to people, wherever you are, unless you're something really special, probably you have 50% of your people not working to their capacity, not happy. 20% actively disengaged. I know these aren't new numbers, but here's the thing I started to scratch my head on. Wait a minute. We're spending billions of dollars every year on leadership development programs. Are we teaching the right things? And if someone today were to say to me, Betsy, what's the #1 tip you would give a corporation or a political campaign or an academic institution about what they should be teaching? Simply, we need to teach our people to be more conscious of the behaviors they do that cause people around them to be not happy. This isn't, and when I think about my book sometimes I think, wow, I didn't unearth the great secret in Egypt that's been hidden for 2,000 years.
So as you can see, not necessarily new ideas. These ideas have been around a long time. But I love that she says basically to be conscious of your actions and behaviors that cause other people to be unhappy. And I'm gonna rephrase this a little in a more positive way. So basically to be conscious of your actions and behaviors, seeking to eliminate or at least reduce the actions and behaviors that cause others to be unhappy, and increase the actions and behaviors that foster trust, care, hope, and positive energy. So that's my take on it. But does anyone have any thoughts after watching that, or any questions?
I like that she, I guess, called it the feminine way of leading now, because it's always been a thing that I've learned along my journey is collaboration is sort of how we are wired, I suppose. So it's kind of interesting that everybody's kind of catching on now to be like, oh, that's kind of a good idea. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
I think too, she makes it sound so simple. Like it's just that we have to be conscious of, but it's like, why is that so hard? One would think that it wouldn't be so difficult, but there's just so many elements to it. But I think what struck me when you were asking me to preview this, Liz, was I'm like, this was years and years ago, and it seems more spot on than ever. But this was pre-Trump and pre-COVID. So just imagine how disengaged people are now, even more so, which we've all been seeing. And when we try to hire and when we try to engage in business development, that kind of thing. Interesting.
I really liked that idea. This is pre-Trump and pre-COVID, and now there are a lot more people with a lot more trauma. And that trauma is really showing up in the workplace. We see that in our programs and the people that we help. When looking at the conscious leadership, I agree. I think she made it very simplistic. Let's all just get conscious about our actions. But so sometimes that there is a consciousness about your actions, but they aren't directed in the most healthy way. I think that taking into account that your team's well-being or your people's well-being, and then also developing the empathy to identify with them, and rather than speak at them, I think is also a very, very important thing. You know, so when looking at conscious leadership, I think that it extends beyond just the consciousness part. I don't know, what do you guys think?
That really,
Sorry, go ahead, Daniel.
thank you. That really resonates with me in terms of the last thing that you said in particular, because it's more than sort of just the consciousness, the awareness. And that feels particularly true for the work that I do. We need to move past just being aware that something is a good practice to operationalizing it. Like, what does that look like in your day-to-day business? How are you intentionally moving forward? And how is every member of your team also aware of their role in that? So it's not just the leadership, but it's that, you know, if you are the front, you know, office administrator and you're the person that answers the phone, that you also know you have a role in this work. So that's all I'll say.
Nice.
Does anyone here have any routines or tricks up their sleeve on how to incorporate this into the daily work within the workplace?
I think there's one good. I'm trying to develop a lot of practices for this, and you know, we hear of like conscious leadership, and then there's positive leadership, and I think the two are a little bit different, because there's I think now, and this is an entirely different conversation, but I think we're starting to develop this toxic positivity, and that doesn't necessarily help things. I think that one thing that I personally try to do, and we try to bake this into our programs too, is an awareness of what I'm doing. You know, is what I'm doing helping somebody, or is it hurting somebody? Is it, you know, I know I need to get done what I need to get done, but what are the unintended consequences of me doing what I need to do? And I think that helps create an awareness with me, and also sort of an empathetic view of what's happening around me. So I can be like a bull in a china shop and go and take care of what I need to take care of. But that's not always the best course of action. I think that there's a harmony there that I need to tap into.
Liz, let me ask you guys, what drew me to this conversation was a question of conscious leadership, was the word conscious. I'm in the leadership space. I'm a leadership coach, as what I do for a living. I've been doing this for 20 years, but the awakening I've had is very simply, if you want better organizations, you need better people, right? I've always known, if I want a better relationship, I want a better marriage, I got to get a better me, right? And so I'm struck at what we mean by the word conscious, and if we've ever defined it here. I get the sense so far what it means is it's simply aware. Hey, are you mindful and aware of the impact that you're having, right, Jeremy? Because to me, that's where leadership is actually all about impact, and I help people recognize the impact that they have the moment they walk into a room, the moment the work that they do, right? Consciousness, to me personally, has been a much deeper recognition of things like my own humanity. Hey, I've always been mindful of impact, but boy, I'm awakening to a whole new dimension of who I am and what I'm about and the kind of impact I create. And so I'm curious if there's a shared definition or even understanding of what we mean by conscious.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know that the answer to that. I think that it definitely does involve being conscious of yourself and what's going on with you, and how that impacts the world around you. But I think it also involves, as a lead for conscious leadership, being intentional about what you want the outcome to be, what the kind of influence that you want to have on those around you, and where you want to lead things. I'd say that conscious capitalism, in my opinion, they just kind of scratch the surface of what that means. they kind of focus on the outcome of achieving, creating value for all the stakeholders involved. So it's very much about not just being focused on the bottom line, which is profits. But in my opinion, it goes much deeper than that, because it is about creating workplaces that are meaningful and have a positive impact on everyone that's there, and is a place for them to grow and become more of who they are. But that's just my own experience.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the hardest. I'm finding it hard to define, right? That's why I bring that question up. Just from my perspective, what I'll offer to you guys is I'm awakening to a deeper level, deeper understanding of my own identity of humanity, right? Identity with humanity. Before I'm an Indian, before I'm a man, before I'm any of these things, I'm actually a person first, and before that, actually, I'm a piece of life on the planet. And as I'm resonating with that identity, it's making me much more connected to and aware of our collective and who everyone else is. So all of a sudden I see that first. And that's a dramatic shift for me. I'll be transparent with you, right? I'm growing up as a minority in this country. Color and skin and all that has always been something that's been in the forefront of my mind, in my own experience. But falling into this place of actually I'm a human first, right? Before I'm an Indian, before I'm a man, and then I'm a form of life is oh man, take that way deeper, and all of a sudden now I'm engaging with people in a very different way. And so I don't know what the answer to that is, frankly. I leave that as a question that I'm sitting with. And I think that's the differentiating factor for me between traditional forms of leadership and leadership development versus this emerging form, what I call the conscious leader. But let me pause there. I've taken up a lot of time.
Thanks for sharing. And it's a common theme, what you're sharing. It resonates with me, and I hear that story with a lot of people that I know that are on this journey. Actually came to a similar realization maybe about 15 years ago when we first started the company. It was a similar sort of almost mystical experience, so to speak, where I came to that realization that I'm one with the universe, I guess. It's the only way I can think to say it.
It's awkward to say it out loud, at least it is for me.
I love this. I think you're building off of your idea of consciousness, or sort of how you approach it. It's reminding me of earlier this year. I'm going back to my roots a little bit in some of our programs and in some of our research initiatives, and my roots are that of an industrial engineer. And some of the constructs I've been looking at are this study called socio-technical systems engineering. And this piggybacks some of the paradigms of humanistic management. Humanistic management has all these, I guess, fundamental principles, but not really any actionable practices. And this has been around since the 1950s. And really two schools of thought developed. One is this looking at people like resources. We have our human resources, and those humans can be reduced down to a measurable set of metrics, like how much did this team produce, or what impact did, not even impact, what how many things did they do that day, or how fast did they do it, and it developed into this culture of shareholder value, and everything was for the shareholders. We didn't give a crap about the employees of the company or the people that were actually doing this. We just cared about the end product, the output. And I think that's really hurt our culture. And I'm saying our culture, I'm saying humanity. It's hurt us. And this whole sort of in the background is humanistic principles have been around since the days of like Likert, And the guy the psychologist that came up with this quasi quantifiable measurement mechanism for subjective data, and now it's becoming increasingly focused on, because the workplace is in a conscious business viewed more as a community and less as a collection of people doing a task. And in that community is an understanding that humans are a holistic thing. We cannot be reduced down to a set of measurements. We try with our OKRs and our metrics that we have to do for our jobs, but then there's this unquantifiable metric that comes with it comes along with empathy, understanding that a person's livelihood, that they have their own sovereignty no matter what task they're doing. And I think that really developing new and novel ways to pull this into the workforce is increasingly important. And we're seeing that especially with COVID. We're all on the phone right now. So we're looking at each other through this slice of screen time. And it's very, very different than interacting in person. And I think that we all have that sense of separation, and it puts things into more of a glaring context. And so I look at consciousness as like a much deeper, much more enveloping thing that we either need to get better at or start incorporating that back into the business to understand that we're people.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You mentioned
What do you
early,
think?
you mentioned early on about this humanistic management, that that it was this idea that seemed like there weren't very many actionable practices. Do you think that that's changed? Do you think that there are actionable practices that are more tangible?
I think some are, and that's sort of that deviation between what's taught in humanistic management versus socio-technical systems engineering or industrial engineering, where there are some things, some of it's recognizing where an intervention is needed. So what's happening with an organization or team that's causing teams to production to decrease, or the culture to be unhappy, or attrition to start to go up from businesses. So there's a recognition that needs to happen, and then there's an awareness of the recognition. Like, so understanding it and saying, I'm starting to understand where the pieces of the puzzle are fitting together to make this a toxic environment. And then there are different various ways that we can go about doing this. And one of the most impactful ways is to have basically create a stakeholder map. Every single team has a set of stakeholders that influence what they do and consume their outputs. And not a lot of teams have a really, I guess, clear picture of who those stakeholders are and why they matter and why they're important. And much more importantly than that, what those stakeholders think about that team. And I think pulling people together and starting to gather insights from that can really, I'm talking about this from a team, it can influence a team and cause the team to come together and start creating a better product. But as a company or as a division, it can really shed a lot of insight on where some of the breakdowns are occurring. And I don't know, I'm just starting to really uncover some of these practices that I'm reading. But I'm open to new ones if you guys have others.
There's a book called Scaling Leadership that is in the Conscious Capitalism Library. And I think we had the writers of the book talk to us 2 or 3 years ago. And they kind of broke down some of the skills of leadership in the context of conscious leadership into, it was 7 or 8 categories. And it was things like creativity, authenticity, collaboration, And so you could either get tested or scale yourself on those areas and then see where you could, lift yourself up in areas where you might need more work. But it was kind of trying to, like you said, we don't have a lot of tangible tools for creating. But if you felt like you needed more help with creating a little bit more of a conscious leadership style, they did kind of try to come up with some metrics or a way for breaking down a conscious leadership style into pieces and seeing where you scored in that way.
Tanya, do you think people don't know that? Or do you think, like, is it the problem that people don't know that and don't bring it out? Or is it that's really not working?
That people don't know it. I mean, I felt like when I went through a process with the prior president of Conscious Capitalism, she brought some things out that I did not know about myself, a little bit of a pushover, things like that.
Yeah, so I guess here's what I'm getting at, which is, as someone in the leadership development space, the epiphany I've had is I don't think anything I'm doing, and I'm engaged in many leadership development programs, and as executive coach, I don't think there's anything I'm doing that's going to help us solve climate change any better. I mean, if you look at what came out of COP26, it's like, hey, how come I'm not producing, if I'm supposedly helping produce the next generation of leaders, I don't think there's anything I'm doing, including all the things that you described, that's going to help me, give me confidence that I'm going to create tomorrow's conscious leaders. And that's a fundamental question I'm sitting with, and a part of the skepticism towards my own skills, and I think I'm good at it, so I mean it respectfully. I don't think any of the content is actually going to make a damn bit of difference, to be honest with you. And I just noticed Kevin and Aaron have their hands up, so sorry, let me stop taking up space here.
Just the hand. And I didn't realize I was on mute. Aaron, would you like to speak up?
Actually, Kevin's hand was up first, so I want to let him go first.
Oh, okay. Kevin. Go ahead, Kevin.
I'm not muted or anything, right?
We can hear you. We can hear you.
I think the thing that we need to focus on is that conscious leadership is one pillar of conscious capitalism. There are four. The one I would like to backdate or look back upon, and we've done programs on this before, is not just conscious leadership, but conscious purpose. And the leadership part should work around and facilitate that purpose part. And especially for the folks who are new, I certainly would invite you to come back for some of those other pillars to look at where they all fit in together. Leadership is certainly important, not suggesting otherwise. One of the things I was going to share is this story that I listened to some folks from University of Chicago doing a study about a steel fabrication business. And the steel fabrication business, had its usual management team, but most of the employees were, frankly, big, tough guys who every day, all day, bent steel to make stuff that people need every day. People don't generally think of big, tough guys who like to bend steel all day as being particularly conscious, as being particularly humanistic. And in fact, the way that company went about doing things is that we all have hearts. We all have minds. We all have cares and woes and aspirations and dreams. And when a conscious leadership focuses on bringing about those things, we all find ourselves experiencing better days. Can't promise every day is a good day, but I think we can do things within our conscious leadership to make better days for all those that we come around. Done.
Thanks. Erin.
Yes, so I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand at first. Sorry. So back to, I'm going to throw this back a little bit to the empathy part. So not only am I a business owner, but I'm currently an AmeriCorps member at the University of Maryland serving at the Do Good Institute. And at the Do Good Institute, we're all about students, doing good now. And part of that I'm learning in becoming the volunteer coordinator is we're creating like a network of coaches, a network of mentors. And the first thing that I'm having to do is research, so that it's called design thinking. So I wanted to share that with you guys. It's something I'm learning, and I think it's quite fascinating to be able to start from that place of empathy. You really have to research and understand, like, you can't just go in and help. You have to understand what people need before you can just jump in. So I wanted to mention that, to be with empathy, you can't just assume, like, I guess in this situation, what your employees would need to be happy. You actually need to speak with them and be like, what can we do differently? That makes a huge difference. So there you go.
Yeah, that is huge. That is huge. It's one of the journeys that we're on at Indigo, is really just opening up the conversation with the whole team. Because I know that I don't know, I can't just assume what they need. That we need to have an ongoing conversation about that. Danielle, I think your hand was raised.
Thank you. So one of the things that, as I'm listening to everyone, and Erin, your point was spot on for me, is I'd like to see us really cultivating a practice, since we were talking about practices, of slowing down. Because I think there are a couple of things in here that feel like they really stand out. First is the creating of a space for exploration of self, right? So who am I within this system that I am working with, in and with? Who are the other individuals on the team? Because we often will see the world, again, through our own particular lens, but we cannot necessarily put ourselves in other people's shoes. And we often don't even ask them what they're thinking about things. And then I think if we are slowing down to be intentional about self and others, then what does that mean as a collective when we come together as a team? So that feels like that's important for me as well. And as leaders, while I think we can carve out the space and time for this, we still have a limited perspective in that it's ours. So kind of, dovetailing off of what Erin just said, I think we need to also build in opportunities to really understand other people's perspectives. And this is the really important thing, because I heard what was said a moment ago about, like, as leaders, as executive coaches, are we pushing people towards becoming the next level of conscious leaders? And the question I'd ask is that what they want? I can have a desire for you, but what do you want to grow and stretch yourself in? And that, to me, feels like the place that you have the most inroads to make a difference is if you understand the perspective of another and you can help guide them on the path they have chosen to walk. That's it.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
point, Danielle. And so in the intersection that I find myself is at an invitation for conscious leadership. None of my clients are asking to become more conscious leaders. And so I'm in this sort of unique, different place than, I'm excellent at serving my clients' interests. What I'm saying is, wow, how can I help them open possibilities even they hadn't considered? And that's where coming out of my own journey of trying to become an even more conscious leader, I'm finding myself in that intersection of I don't want to push my agenda onto anybody, but can I invite people into a conversation that might elevate their own desires in a way they hadn't thought about or hadn't articulated yet? But excellent point.
Laura, your hand is raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm kind of pulling a couple points together. So what Danielle just said about slowing down, and then what the video had talked about with this, what I guess she was talking about as a more feminine approach to looking at things. I was introduced to a book called I think it's called the Do Less Manual. And what was interesting about the perspective and how I feel like it kind of pulls in and it makes, I don't know if this is all of my conscious leadership, but it definitely feels like a part of the overall package that I need to like continue to sort of curate and work with. But the idea is that we work off of this sort of masculine cycle that doesn't really serve us. We do this like 24-hour cycle, list form, when all of the world, like the nature and everything, works off of this more female cycle. So there are like cycles with the moon, cycles with the seasons, and the idea being that less about seeing your day, your tasks, your mission, your purpose as like a list that is to be accomplished in 24 hours, and more about thinking about things as cycles. And one of the things that came out of this book that I feel like I'm really trying to put into my leadership and my expectations for myself, but also my expectations for the people who I'm working with, is that, you know, flowers don't bloom all year long. There's a reason why they're dormant. And that there is, one of the things that this woman was talking about is like one of the times when she was probably working the hardest in her life is when she was pregnant, but you can't tell that she's doing all this hard work because it's all happening inside. But just this idea of, I'm not quite sure what the word is, but it's like grace. It's, I'm working on it. I feel like I grew up and have always been very like, all right, get it done. Get it done. You know, there's empathy there on the side, like empathy light, but also like, you got two hands, like, let's work, let's get it done. And so I'm really trying to adopt those principles for myself. And then also figuring out ways to be able to share that with the people who I'm working with in like a real and meaningful way. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you for sharing that. That is really interesting. I actually never thought of the whole tasks and lists to accomplish in a day. I've never really thought of that as a masculine style. So thanks for pointing that out. It's very interesting because it definitely contrasts with nature and the way that the natural cycle of things. Wendy, did you have your hand up?
I did not. I just was putting some
Oh,
stuff
okay.
in chat because we are about 5 minutes away from closing time. But what
Okay.
a great discussion. Gosh. Thank
Yeah,
you,
we'll
everybody.
keep it going for a few minutes. Alicia.
Okay, I just wanted to underline, highlight, and maybe put a couple exclamation points around doing less, because I'm there with you, Laura. I was like, I'm listening to all of this information and I'm like, okay, do I start by measuring things? Do I start by noticing things? Do I start by being intentional? Do I start, like, there are all of these things that now I feel like are on my list that I want to do more of. And I'm like, I need to stop doing more of things. So let me just pick one thing and say, I'm going to try that and see if it works, because in this conversation, there have been such great ideas. Maybe, I don't know, 20 of them, different ideas, books to read, resources. All of that is great. The way my mind works though, is that I take all of it in and I'm gonna just throw this back to Laura again. I make a list and I'm like, oh, so this book I should read, and this book I should read, and this book I should read and highlight. And I've just got to focus on what I'm going to try to do is focus on doing a little bit less and being more intentional about the things that I am doing. So saying with the leadership, the thing that I want to focus on is really making sure that my team feels like a we. So that's the thing I'm going to focus on with this conscious leadership, making sure that the team feels like a we, and that I am leading from a position of we. So I'm leading from a position of making everyone feel like they're a part of the team, and a big part of the team. Like they're not just some small peon, that they're really like, it takes all of us to make this happen. So that's what I am. I just wanted to share my commitment, because if I share it out loud, then it's more likely that I will do it. So I am sharing that commitment with all of you that I am going to work on that.
And it's recorded.
Oh, well, never mind. Scratch that. Edit all of that.
Too late.
No, that is my commitment, because there are a lot of great ideas here. And I know that a lot of us that are doers, we will take all of them and be like, I can do all of these ideas. Nope, I'm just doing one. So I invite you to join me and just do one. And let's see what happens next time we meet. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Alicia. Well, because we're coming up at the end of the hour, we'll wrap this up, but I wanted to give Tanya just a moment to give her blurb about membership for those of who might be interested in joining C3MD.
Thank you so much, Liz. I hope that you enjoyed this discussion. We're going to be having conversations like this all throughout 2022. If you go on over to Conscious Capitalism, I get a little like stage fright every time I have to say the name of our website. It's consciouscapitalismcmd.org, where all of our different membership categories are listed. If you become a membership level of corporate, you can have your logo and website listed. It's kind of like a little bit of a chapter listing for other conscious businesses. So you kind of look there first when you are looking for services, and kind of join the organization to propel conscious capitalism forward. And I hope that you will join us. And please, I'm at Tanya at arthursteinfinancial.com if you want to ask me any questions about becoming a member and what the benefits are.
Thank you, Tanya.
And you can ask
and I
us
invite
questions
everyone
on the website too. Just give us your email. We'll send you a notice. Because you registered here, you may get an email from us, but you can opt out if you don't wish to receive them. Sorry, go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, and I'm going to put in the chat my email. Anyone is welcome to email me if you have any questions. I'm putting my Indigo Inc. email because that's the one I check regularly, but you can email, I think it's c3md@gmail.com, or something like that. It's on the
thank you to all the
website.
members.
I check that about once a week. But if you want a more immediate response, email me directly at Indigo Inc. I want to also invite everyone to our next event, which will be on Tuesday, January 18th. Is that right? Yeah, January 18th, which will be another Conscious Coffee. And it's going to be a similar format to this, but we're going to be discussing the ideas of stakeholder orientation. And Wendy, am I missing anything else before we wrap things up?
I don't think so, but if anybody wants to put their email and chat to, further the discussion, that's great. We'll post this along with a blog with some of the resources and things that we talked about on the website by next week. And, you can usually check out, see what things have been happening and see other past meetings. But tell people about this organization and just have them come. We're way more interested in having conversation and inviting people than like making money at events. Like, we don't really care about that. We really just want to engage. So if you want to invite some people and want a free code to register, let us know.
And I also invite you to check out the recording of Ignite, right? It just was up on, it's up on the
Ignite
YouTube
videos
page.
are posted. So go to ignitehowardcounty.com. I'll put that in the chat. And there were 11 excellent speakers, including 2 folks who are here, Danielle and Aaron. And it's a really cool event, and we love putting it together. So ignitehowardcounty.com, I'm putting it in chat. And C3MD is the organizing sponsor, so we kind of make sure it happens. So looking forward to it. So if you know anyone, you can start to apply to speak for next year anytime. Alicia, Laura, others, come on. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. All right, we've gone over 2 minutes. Thanks so much, everybody. See ya.
Thank you so much for coming out.
Hey, great. Thanks
you
for
all.
having us.
Bye.
Thanks, Neeraj. Great to meet you, and Jeremy. And
Great to
thanks,
meet all you guys.
Connor.
Thank
Nice to
you.
meet you.
Yeah,
Thanks
Thanks
appreciate
for
it.
coming out.
All right, have a great morning.
You too.
Bye.
You too.
Bye.
Thanks.